this is sort of an ongoing segment on the show, the whole cancel culture and media censorship. It's sort of a big issue, but there is some research into this stuff. We've also differed on this particular topic, what we think should happen, how this should be handled by society. I think media is very important. I think it's, in the West especially, we criticize countries like China for the way they treat their media, but there are some benefits to having a state media. That's why every country basically has a state media except for the United States. The United Kingdom is trying to get rid of the BBC the Tories have been trying to get rid of them for decades, man.
I was actually going to bring up the BBC as kind of my example of a state media that I would really like to see implemented. Like, I think the BBC just does absolutely fantastic work.
I think they're way too conservative. They're extremely pro-capitalist for a state media. But obviously, when you compare it to the United States, though, it blows them out of the fucking water.
Well, I guess, yeah, that is a comparative evaluation to U.S. media. Yeah.
But so there are a couple of studies I wanted to mention briefly that shed some light on sort of what we know scientifically about this stuff. The first one here is a fairly recent one, January 2020 study. I'm just going to read the abstract. How effective is fact-checking and countervailing alternative facts? So after 2016, the election where Trump basically used Cambridge Analytica to buy the election via Facebook ads, these companies have slowly started implementing these fact checks. We have companies like PolitiFact now that sort of do this as a business, as an industry. How effective is fact-checking in countervailing, quote, alternative facts, i.e. misleading statements by politicians? In a randomized online experiment during the 2017 French presidential election campaign, we subjected subgroups of 2,480 French voters to alternative facts by the extreme right candidate Marine Le Pen and or corresponding facts about the European refugee crisis from official sources. We find that 1. Alternative facts are highly persuasive. 2. Fact-checking improves factual knowledge of voters. 3. But it does not affect policy conclusions or support for the candidate. 4. Exposure to facts alone does not decrease support for the candidate, even though voters update their knowledge. We find evidence consistent with the view that at least part of the effect can be explained by raising salience of the immigration issue. So, in other words, people don't care about the facts. This is what we were talking about earlier. They have a belief, and they look for facts to verify their pre-existing belief. They don't, and when they're presented with the real facts, they'll change their knowledge. They now know the truth, but they don't fucking care. They vote Marine Le Pen anyway because they hate fucking immigrants. They're racists, basically, is what this study's saying.
Yeah, that seems to be kind of to coincide with, or to line up pretty well with certainly my experiences with talking to people. It's really hard, no matter how many facts and studies that you can present or how many times you can show that the people that they're listening to are misrepresenting things. It's really difficult to actually get people to admit that they were wrong or that they were lied to.
You know, immigrants commit more crimes than American citizens, Tony.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. And, you know, when you show them that on the whole that they commit fewer crimes, that they're a lot more law-abiding, and then you can give salient arguments as to why they would want to be more law-abiding because they're wanting to stay here. Yeah, none of that seems to matter, or those facts are dismissed as just being another opinion. I think that's kind of what I see.
What I run up against is your sources are wrong because they're controlled by Klaus Schwab or whatever Jewish person you want to name.
Yeah. So I come up against that a lot. I'll be arguing with somebody that's listening to Tucker Carlson, and then I'll say, oh, well, let's just look up the Immigration Naturalization Service, what their numbers are on arrest or whatever for talking, like, say, immigration. And yeah, well, those are the government numbers, and Biden's in control of the government. Well, we can find the numbers from when Trump was in the government. Well, that's all deep state run by the. Okay, well, where's Tucker getting his numbers? Like, what's he citing? Because he's not citing any numbers usually, or he'll be citing INS numbers kind of out of context. He'll give a big number about the number of immigrants arrested this year, the number of, there was 50,000 illegal immigrants that come over in Texas this year, trying to scare people. And then you can point out that, the past 3 years it was 60,000. So it's actually down this year, but they're not interested in those numbers. They're just interested in the one number that was picked and given out of context that proves the point that they already are primed to believe.
Yeah, there's a specific example that reminds me of that I just heard not too long ago. He was talking about this exact issue, and he said he'll say something like, "Well, we know." He'll always say this: "We know that immigrants commit more crimes than American citizens," and then he cites a statistic from one city in one state. That's his citation, and his audience believes it. They believe the first thing he said because of the second statistic, which doesn't prove the first thing he said because they're not smart enough to figure that out or to parse that, or they don't understand statistics or.
Yeah, it's the inability to evaluate evidence, to know how to read statistics, know how to read a graph, know how to process numbers and realize like a number given out of context is meaningless because you have to see the trend because that's what he's talking about is a trend. If things go up, you have to show that they're going up, but they're not showing that it's going up. They're just giving a number and leading you to believe that, well, the numbers prior were lower.
Well, he's telling them what they want to hear, what they already believe, and then he's giving them some scrap of evidence that he's conjured out of thin air to back that up with.
Well, it does make his job easier. I imagine the job of a right-wing commentator is a pretty easy one. You don't have to do a lot of fact-checking.
Yeah, their fact-checking department is pretty slim over at Tucker Carlson tonight.
Let them take a break. You guys take a month off. You're not getting paid for it.
So what's the solution here? What's the solution besides what I want to do is ban lying I want to put these people in fucking jail for lying to the public, these public figures. That's what I want to do. But what's the non-coercive, non-authoritarian solution here? Because what the Democrats have basically done is, very little. They have Occupy Democrats, which is supposed to be their answer to right-wing bullshit, which is like a DNC social media org that once in a while will have some vaguely not true shit, but it's, for the most part, it's factual. But it's inflammatory, supposed to be inflammatory the way the right is inflammatory. Doesn't go to that extreme, obviously, but that's their solution. It's fucking garbage.
Yeah.
What's the solution? What do you do about people like Tucker Carlson lying to the American public on his quote-unquote news show?
Realistically, I don't know. I don't know what can be done.
Yeah.
If I were in control of the government for 30 years, I think it would just be education. Like, hands down, it has to start with education. I think you could take out, I'm trying to think of what class I could take out to put in critical thinking. Like, that's to Carl Sagan's Demon Haunted World should be required reading in every school across the country. It's a great little book where he talks about logic, critical thinking. He gives all these great anecdotes, little stories about how you evaluate knowledge, and everyone should read it. I don't know. You could probably cut out algebra.
It hurts.
Probably cut algebra out foreign language. Like, realistically,
yeah,
our language is the best. Nobody gives a shit about Spanish. So just cut foreign language requirements, put Carl Sagan in there.
We can get rid of French. French is terrible. Even in France, they should get rid of it, to be honest. It sounds like shit.
Realistically, yeah.
Can't even understand what they're saying, dude.
And just their culture offends me.
Yeah.
And I feel like just the whole French attitude, libertine.
They're all Harvey Weinstein, and they're okay with it.
Thank you. Yes, that's it. That's pretty much, you nailed it.
So here's the other study I had to inform our listeners here. This is from 2016. This came on the heels of the 2016 election that we were discussing earlier, Cambridge Analytica and all that shit. This one's called Less Than You Think, Prevalence and Predictors of Fake News Dissemination on Facebook. Abstract. So-called fake news has renewed concerns about the prevalence and effects of misinformation in political campaigns. Given the potential for widespread dissemination of this material, we examined the individual level characteristics associated with sharing false articles during the 2016 U.S. presidential campaign. To do so, we uniquely link an original survey with respondents' sharing activity as recorded in Facebook profile data. Conservatives were more likely to share articles from fake news domains, which in 2016 were largely pro-Trump in orientation, than liberals or moderates. We also find a strong age effect, which persists after controlling for partisanship and ideology. On average, users over 65 shared nearly 7 times as many articles from fake news domains as the youngest age group. Again, this is after controls for partisanship and ideology. So in summary here, conservatives are more likely to share fake news articles or articles from fake news domains is how the study has it laid out. Not surprising. And old people share fake news fucking constantly.
It is unsurprising. I think a lot of it has to do with older generations not being savvy to how algorithms work. I know this is a conversation I've had with people. They're used to the idea of the nightly news and having somebody go through it and kind of process and really break down the news that is relevant for the viewers. It's not too partisan. Everything's kind of parsed and broken down, and they are more trusting of the news because the news wasn't always as partisan as it is today and wasn't always so flagrantly, brokenly partisan. And they don't realize that now we have these different algorithms that once they find out what bucket you fall into, they're going to purely feed you things that are going to get you to respond. So you're going to get, if you've got older people that tend to lean right, your news feed is just going to be a barrage of the most inflammatory right-wing culture crap that's going to get you to share it. And they believe that. I don't think a lot of times they step back and think like, is this stuff I'm being fed? Is this the actual news, or is this just stories that people are writing because they're going to get clicks, and this is what's being given to me because the almighty algorithm has deemed that I'm going to click on it and share it?
Yeah, I think you're right. That's a really good point, because in their life experience, the news doesn't lie.
Yeah.
There was no fake news until the early 2000s, maybe the earliest. They don't have any experience of that. They don't understand that they're just being blatantly fucking lied to, probably.
Yeah, they're used to Walter Cronkite coming in and telling them how it is. And the stories that Walter Cronkite would bring you, he's going to sit down and he's going to disseminate, and they're going to view it as he's giving you a fair analysis of some left wing and some right wing, and he's going to try to just give it to you as straight as he can. And that just doesn't happen today. But I think they're so pre-programmed and wired to accept information in that manner. They're not as savvy to the modern information economy, really. This is money we're talking about. Stories are designed to have you share them on, especially right-wing story, like shit that older right-wing people that I know, the stories that they're getting are written and designed to have them share it on Facebook. Yeah. They're Facebook stories. And they're very good at that. These algorithms are incredibly well designed to appeal to parts of our psyche that, we're not even aware of.
People like the Daily Wire will buy these targeted ads that is an article that they think is, see, this is what I was getting ready to say. We need to make a legal classification called news. And in order to use that term, your company needs to be, 1, nonprofit, and 2, vetted for truthfulness and accuracy by somebody. And you can't have companies like Fox pretending that they're fucking news anymore. Because the term news used to mean fact, like they were synonymous. I'm going to watch the news. The news meant what is happening in the real world, not in the fucking fake made up world. Is that a viable solution?
I don't think it's viable at all. Could you imagine
Why not?
Could you imagine the reaction of Tucker Carlson if Joe Biden says he's going to create a ministry of the news where they're going to vet everything Tucker says to ensure that it's palatable to be fed to the American people? Conservatives would freak the fuck out. They would start making
Fox couldn't do it because they would have to go nonprofit. So they would have to drop they would have to drop news out of their name.
Which is why they would get all of their old people that vote really fucking riled up, and they would keep it from ever even happening. They would start making allusions to 1984 that they don't know what they're talking about because they've never read 1984. And and it would get killed in a fucking heartbeat. No doubt about it.
Fair enough.
So that's why you have to go under the radar. You have to get education. Start off real early. It's a 20, 30-year project.
All right. Let's look at some tops. Start off here with cable news. What do you think the top cable news show is, Tony? Tucker?
I'm going to go with Tucker, yeah. I think top news shows, it's got to be Tucker. I know Fox News is like the big one, right? And I believe Tuck, he's the top Fox News guy.
Yeah, this is for this quarter. The Fox 5 is number 1. We're talking cable news here. The 5, which is weekdays at 5. It's on weekdays at 5 p.m. So this is not a primetime show, but it is currently number 1 somehow.
Well, that's right before their target demographic's bedtime.
I guess so.
So that makes sense. It's like our 9 p.m., 10 p.m. show. Theirs is at 5.
On right after Judge Judy.
It's Judge Judy, local news, Fox 5, bed.
Yeah.
Or take your blood pressure medicine, then bed.
Often Tucker is 1, but Tucker's 2. Number 3 is Hannity, Sean Hannity. I think it's just called Hannity. Out of the top 10, the top 8 are all Fox News shows. The top 8 cable news shows are all Fox News shows. Number 9 is Rachel Maddow, and Fox News is number 10.
Okay.
So 9 out of the top 10 are Fox News. Top 8 all Fox News, and you got Rachel Maddow in there at 9.